to me, they will always be the failing New York Times. This is the guest essay from this week in the opinion section. My liberal campus is pushing free thinkers to the right. This is from March 1st, 2023. So this is a real evergreen topic. So Adam Hoffman, senior at Princeton, writes, in the not-so-distant past, the typical college Republican idolized Ronald Reagan, fretted about the national debt, and read Edmund Burke. Political sophistication to that person implied belief in the status quo. For that bygone breed, an education at an elite institution was a moderating finishing school. Even then, American universities skewed liberal, but the conservatives of old had real opportunities to make their case and have their ideas respectfully challenged in the public square. At my own school, Princeton, I've been told politics are mostly separable from personal relationships. How things have changed. Today's campus conservatives embrace a less moderate, complacent, and institutional approach to politics. Instead of belief in the status quo, many tend towards scorched earth politics, but these changes aren't solely the consequence of a fractured national politics. They're also the results of puritanically progressive campuses that alienate conservative students from their liberal peers and college as a whole. The distrust of authority, the protest and disobedience that have characterized the left's activism over the past half century or so have arrived on the right. The American universities that once served as moderating finishing schools have become breeding grounds for conservative firebrands. Now, I mentioned earlier that, this is an old head episode of the show. This is, and perhaps when I went to college, I don't think that the campus, the campus policing and anti-policing, or just like the woke mind virus had not spread as far as it is today. But
excuse me, tell that to Jeremy Piven and the rest of those merry pranksters in the film PCU, which came out in 1992.
PC? Politically correct. And it's not just politics, it's everything. It's what you eat, it's what you wear, and it's what you say. And if you don't watch yourself, you can get in a buttload of trouble.
It's never changed. Nothing has changed. It's all the same. The difference is that the institutions of higher learning in this country are being disassembled, are being taken into pieces. Every fucking article about what's going on in the college campuses and all the crazy woke mobs or whatever the fuck, none of them point to the fact that the buildings are being stripped for fucking parts and they're taking out the copper wiring. It's a sinking ship. Higher education as such is being dismantled. And you can't make sense of any of the affects of students or teachers in higher education without understanding that everybody in this is slowly coming to the realization that they're in a burning building. I think about how there's a lot of anthropological research that was done about Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest and potlatch societies. And that became very influential in American anthropology. And people kind of took it for granted. This is how potlatch societies and tribal kinship networks worked in Pacific Northwest. And then generations pass and people start pointing out, well, all of this research comes from European anthropologists showing up to observe these societies as they were dying. At the moment that settled American society was choking them into oblivion. And so you can't really take the way that the societies functioned at that point and generalize it to the history of that society. And I always think the same thing looking at any of these articles about colleges now. None of them take into account that the fucking higher education is being destroyed, not just being dismantled from within, not just as a occupation, as a profession being annihilated, but also the promise that going to college will get you anything is being obliterated. Well, it's getting more and more expensive to go. And that means everybody in college, student and faculty, has in a fucking lifeboat morality where they are turned into these little Hobbesian demons tearing at each other because the fucking thing is going down.
Back to your invocation of PCU, though, the point I was going to make, he said, what does he say here? It used to be that college, campus conservatives weren't alienated from the student body and college as a whole. David Spade and his fellow Edmund Burke readers in PCU were very alienated from the campus scene. And like, if you are a campus conservative at any point in American history, the chances are you were alienated from your peer groups and the university at large. It is a freakish thing to be. Like, at no point were they ever embraced or considered anything other than contemptible in American college culture. I don't know, maybe post 60s or whatever. But like, I remember like campus conservative was always a joke.
I mean, campus Democrats are nerds too. Caring about politics when you're in college is dork shit one way or the other. But it takes a special breed of social malcontent to be like, I'm going to care about being a conservative while I'm in college.
Well, I also think that it's funny that it's like there's sort of like references to like, the conservatives of yore, ye old conservative shoppy, you used to envy Ronald Reagan. And like, this is like such a habit of conservative writing too, which is this like atemporal, anachronistic like invocation of an incredibly distant past, except the incredibly distant past is like what, like 18 years ago or something. Like they're not talking about like, you know, about the boys at Harvard doing Edwardian cosplay and sucking each other off in brideshead rituals in the 19th century. Like they're talking about like kids who went to Penn State in 2005. Like it's just such a foreshortening of the historical imagination to make this point about this like sea change that hasn't really happened. Yeah, as you said, like at least since the Vietnam War. Right, at least since the beginning of the student movement in the 60s and the Vietnam War, campus conservatism has been an outlier. And campus conservatives have responded to sort of like a degree of performative standoffishness and firebrand rhetoric to the puritanical excesses of the fucking hippies on the left. But that's been true for the last half century.
Yeah, Jacob, it's like those accounts that are like Western civilization and, you know, traditional architecture that are like doing posts now that are like, this is what they've taken from us. And the thing that they've taken from us is not like the Parthenon, it's like Nintendo 64, which came out in 1996.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. It treats like it's as if like, you know, the fragmentary remnants of Democritus and fucking Mike Tyson knockout occurred at exactly the same time.
So going back to Hoffman here, he says, the story of this transformation, according to the social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, ding, 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 ding. If your op-ed piece endorses the work of absolute con man Jonathan Haidt, America's favorite social scientist, then I think you can know where this is going. But starts around 2014, so okay, I had graduated, when Gen Z arrived on campus. The new progressive students were less tolerant of heterodox ideas and individuals. Demands to rescind invitations to speakers seemed to spike. The terms microaggression and trigger warning made it into everyday campus parlance. At Yale, for instance, a lecturer's suggestion that students should determine which Halloween costumes are acceptable for themselves ignited a firestorm. These changes were felt on my campus, too. Princeton has become much more politicized over the last 10 years, said Thomas Kelly, a philosophy professor. It also became more progressive. Diversity training sessions blatantly endorse progressive ideas. Espousing a colorblind ideal, for example, is deemed a micro-invalidation. Bureaucrats police conduct and speech. Many programs cater to left-wing causes. For those on the right, the experience is alienating. The typical American's views on gender ideology or American history are often irrelevant to his or her day-to-day life. But for the conservative college student, life is punctuated by political checkpoints. Classes may begin with requests for preferred pronouns or land acknowledgments. A student who jokes about the wrong subject may face social punishment. All students should welcome challenges to their most cherished beliefs, but from what I've seen on campus, students are not invited to debate. They're expected to conform.
Not invited to debate. Oh my God.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. It sounds awful. It does sound awful to go to college now. It does sound like it would be a huge pain in the ass, and everybody seems like they're fucking miserable. And really, it seems like the real problem is that this is one of the few places where you have to be around a lot of other people in a social situation. And at this point in American history, being around a lot of other people in a social situation is basically torture because everybody is an insane narcissist?
Well, that's really, I think that point is really well taken. And interestingly, and I have to give credit to my beloved husband, actually, for pointing this out to some friends of ours the other night. You know, one of the interesting things about the American college campus, and even more so at an elite college campus, you know, at the Princetons and Harvards of the world, is that they're basically the last place, speaking of saving the cultural tradition of the West, they're basically the last place in America that is basically an urban walkable village. Right. That is the experience. That is the experience.
It's a 15-minute city. Princeton is a 15-minute city.
Princeton is a 15-minute city. But so you have all of these people whose brains have been fried from the constant stream of information through 1,000 new media sources, all then being forced basically into a medieval village and forced to interact with each other and share and reinforce the most insane witchcrafty beliefs. And so it's inevitable that you're going to have social conflict and that, a few people are going to get burned at the metaphorical stake. That's just the nature of village life. They should get out into the fields more.
And a place where everybody has been conditioned their entire life to think of themselves as consumers, where they are spending a ton of money, borrowing a ton of money to have this experience. They want it to be like they want it to be. Like, there's no way, given the conditions we find ourselves in at this point, to make the college experience some sort of lapidary Athenian idol, because no one lives in that fucking country, and you can't turn college into some sort of pocket away from that unless you were to, for one thing, make it way, way, way less expensive to have to go to fucking college. For one thing,
well,
reduce the insane stakes at play here of the amount of money people are having to borrow to do it.
Yeah, I do think, though, that does point to, and this is speaking of the New York Times, only, loving to cover like the smallest possible sliver of the population. I think that, and plenty of people have made this observation before, all of these trends and experiences tend to attenuate the further away you get from elite institutions. Like, I think that probably the experience of going to ASU or Alabama actually probably is less different in any case, less politically fraught than certainly going to Harvard, and probably not much more politically fraught than it was to go there in 1985, in part because, as you alluded to, Matt, I think, most of those places have basically just been converted into technical colleges. I mean, we don't call them such, but it's all vocational training. So, I think it's the attempt to sort of graft that Athenian idol onto the modern hedge fund with a college attached that constitutes Princeton or Harvard or Yale, that like produces the most maximal version of that kind of derangement.
How about we abolish the Ivy League? What if we just get rid of these stupid schools?
Yeah, none of their teams are good anyway.
Is that a possibility? Would that not be a bipartisan solution, and it would make us stop having to read these goddamn articles? Well, I think this is the answer to the question. Not like turn them public or any of that bullshit. Raise them to the ground, salt the earth, and just get rid of them. We do not need them. They're only annoying. They only exist to produce annoying people and to produce annoying discourse.
I can't help but think that if we got the troops together, we could come up with a plant-based league of educational institutions that would beat the pants off of the Ivy League.
Yeah, Kudzu League. How about that?
The Monstera League.
No, like the top 20, 30 universities they're done. They're gone. Nobody gets to go to them. We couldn't handle it. Okay, you happy now? Nobody gets to go to these. I think this is an actual solution. And until I hear somebody actually propose this, I don't want to hear them bitching about it. Because what is the solution to this? Does this asshole have an answer to this question other than complaining about it? No, none of them do. It is just to fill space and time and to curate your victimhood complex.
Well, Matt, I mean, like your solution is, of course, a noble and just one, and you think it would be a sort of a populist battle cry that could rally both the right and left, but that's not going to work on the Mr. Hoffmans of the world, because they want to go to fucking Yale and Princeton.
Tough shit. You don't get to go.
Well, they still value, they still value the social output and the social capital that a degree from one of these places confers. And that's how you know. I mean, that's really too how you know that this is all pantomime. Right? Because if you were serious about this, there are plenty of colleges in the United States that are much more friendly to conservative ideas, both actual conservative colleges and or places like Stanford, for example, or U Chicago that are much friendlier to conservative ideology, especially in certain disciplines. And those are good schools too, but you elected to go to a very particular one. You clearly knew what you were getting into going in. And now, in fact, you're actually both trading on its reputation and using the cultural currency of trashing its reputation for clicks and likes to advance your own social and career capital in just the crassest way possible.
I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because there's not much to talk about here. But Hoffman says sometimes young conservative agitators are dismissed cynically as attention seekers or opportunists. But in my experience, the negative consequences of conservative activism on campus, both personal and professional, far outweigh any benefit that they might incur. And tellingly, most conservatives report censoring themselves during their college years. Some might think that this pervasive progressivism would encourage conservative students to change their views. But in fact, it has the opposite effect. Graduates of schools like Loyola, University of Chicago, George Washington University, and Mount Holyoke have described how the rampant leftism on their campuses pushed them to the right. A 2017 article in the Washington Examiner quotes a Furman University graduate saying that the aggressive leftist culture on campus made me a more radical conservative because I had only two options: abandon my beliefs and conform, or fight back. She chose to fight back.
How? I mean, at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're voting Republican harder? That's it. You were voting Republican, and now you're just voting Republican, but more basely.
Yeah, I know. I think that's it, because I think Mr. Hoffman here is in the University of yore, it incubated, like you said, a finishing school for people who'd go on to be conservatives who revered Ronald Reagan and the status quo. And what he's saying is because of the land acknowledgements and the pronouns, they're all becoming feral-based groypers, which he doesn't really want to truck with. So he's saying that they're fucking up because he's saying probably the jobs that I want to get in Washington are going to the fucking going to the based people. They're going to the people taking the red pill. And, and it's because of the campus progressivism. I think that's what's going on in this piece. Skipping ahead to the end here. Mr. Trump and Ron DeSantis are different kinds of politicians from John McCain and Mitt Romney. To be sure, top universities have produced outspoken conservatives like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. But now formative years at elite institutions that have gone woke are convincing right-leaning students and heterodox thinkers that society's most august institutions, from media outlets to universities, are fundamentally broken and need to be set on a different path. If colleges don't want to produce a new generation of conservative firebrands, they need to pump the brakes on campus progressivism. Campuses that are the more welcoming to conservatives are in the university's best own interests. So there we go. That's Reid Hoffman talking about his bold heterodox ideas.
Nobody ever says what the heterodox ideas are.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are they? Because it seems to me that they basically consist of that there are sort of two semi-overlapping circles in the diagram of what constitutes heterodox ideas. I mean, one of them is just saying the N-word. That's on the one hand, and then all of the other ones are just fucking mid-century University of Chicago economic ideas that still basically predominate in the United States, or what, that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. I mean, I suppose we could say that idea has become less orthodox in our society over the last 20 years, but it's still effectively the received wisdom for the vast majority of people in this country in one way or another. So, the idea that by embracing traditional gender roles and supply side economics, you are violating the orthodoxies of American society is absurd. I mean, it's completely crackpot. The people who have heterodox ideas are all those puritanical liberal weirdos who are yelling at you about land acknowledgements, at least within the context of our society writ large and not within the fucking micro celebrity realm of whatever social media platform you're on.
I mean, I think it's just similar to the way the word like woke has just become a catch-all for like, I mean, like, because it used to be like, I mean, was it Thomas Chatterbox Williams? Matt, like he got you noticed that he got into some hot water over the Scott Adams Dilbert thing because he was saying like, well, yeah, he should have been canceled. He was saying shit that was racist 30 years ago, not something like he didn't trip over some social mora that was like invented a week ago by college students. He was just like, no, we need segregation now, segregation forever.
Well, Tom, I mean, yeah, but that you're right. That's. It is always a step too far is always just like a thing that seems novel to me. But even in that article, like earlier, where he said, and having written for the New York Times, I could feel the heavy hand of an editor there. He said cancellations of events on campus seemed to spike. I absolutely guarantee that in the original draft of that op-ed, it said campus cancellations of conservative speakers spiked. And then the editor said, well, you're not actually one of our permanent columnists, so we do have to fact check you. So can you provide any documentation of that? Yeah. So and then the answer is, oh no, it actually turns out that like speaker cancellations have basically remained flat. It's just that you've heard of a few more these days because your brain is constantly plugged into an outreach machine. And so they had to change the language to it seemed to. Like everything here is it's all individualized perceptual stuff. It's not like it's we've done a longitudinal study of, the number of land acknowledgements that have occurred on the first day of classes in American universities over the last 25 years. It's just like just vibes that, oh yeah, I didn't remember seeing this happen in a movie I saw about college when I was a teenager.
Yeah, everybody is Julianne Moore from Safe. Like that's it. That's the default mode of perception in America. You are projecting a paranoid fantasy around you, and you interact with the world through a digital matrix that feeds you something that you think of as the world, but you are actually selecting for the entire time subconsciously. And then you react to that. And that's true of the hysterical snowflakes on campus that this guy has to deal with. It's true to this guy. And it's not a thing that is in anyone's power to change. It is the reality that we find ourselves trapped within. And all that anyone can do is try to make a little bit of hay for themselves by pointing out something that one segment of this terminally paranoid group of people can respond to and go like, yes, I've noticed that too. You're a hero. Here's money.